Hello, I'm your host, Leonard Duncan. Welcome to a new episode of ATV-TALK and Motorsports Podcast. Please join us every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We bring you interviews with industry professionals, live events, live news about the motorsports industry in every episode. Enjoy the show. David Schloss, welcome to ATV Talk. How are you, man?
Leonard, I'm doing terrific. Thank you so much for having me. It's a real honor and a thrill.
Well, you know, some people have called me a journalist for doing what I do, and
Yep.
I am not a journalist. You are a true journalist. You've written stories, you've done things that I will never do. I talk to people and get them to tell their story their way with their words. And this is where it comes from, someone that has written about our industry, been involved in our industry. And yes, we met previously in London, Kentucky, and then we got reconnected at the Legends race.
Yeah.
You asked me a question before we started taping about how the Legends race was for me.
Yep.
I'm still in awe.
Right. Exactly. I feel the same way. Now, since my days at ATV Insider, which really for me concluded in like 2010, so we're 15 years removed, where I was a regular, I guess you'd say, on the circuit. And I'll occasionally go to a race here and there. But this felt like old times to me for the first time in 15 years, going in and out of the pits. And I'd brought some copies of the magazine that I'd never gotten autographed by some of the riders I knew would be there, Natalie, Wimmer, Gust, etc. And that feeling of going around to each of their pits, having a magazine to give them, it was just like old times. And it was a really good feeling. And another amazing thing was, going into this, I really didn't know what to expect on the track. And I think we were all really pleasantly surprised how awesome these guys still are. And the thing that stood out to me is they're the same as they were. The lap times might not be quite the same, but they were super impressive. But when you saw Dustin Wimmer, he looked like Dustin Wimmer on the bike. John Natale looked like John Natale on the bike. So it was really like going back in time.
It really was. I've gotten to see John Natale ride out on the West Coast during the Huevos event.
Yep.
And super impressed. He was super impressive at that. He made it to the semifinals. There was voices going around that he could go to the final and even win it. And at 47 years old, great physical condition.
Yeah.
Wimmer's a little younger, but still coming off the couch and being able to perform at that level is something to be said.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Natale mentioned it on the podium after his speech. He said, I'll probably get in trouble with this. I think he was alluding to a copyright when he said, "I am Iron Man." And it really, for me, it's like he is superhuman. If you think about it, he just, like you said, he's almost ageless. And all those guys were impressive. But yeah, he is sort of like a freak of nature. But if you think about, you go back a little bit in time, I mean, Doug Gust, he was 40 years old out there. So those are some special guys, and that's why they're legends, really.
Oh, yeah. Chad Wienen could have joined into that deal because he raced at the same time some of those guys were in their heyday.
Yeah.
Joel was coming into the pro class 10 years ago, 12 years ago.
Right.
When some of those guys were still racing.
Right.
Now he's top dog.
Yeah, it's really something. And just going back, sort of preparing for our interview, going back and looking at some of the issues of ATV Insider magazine, Joel Hetrick was pretty much not covered at all, because he was still a young amateur. Really, we mentioned him here and there as to me, he was like the first ATV prodigy, child prodigy. We took a couple pictures of his bike, but he was typically, at least in my time period, wasn't really part of the equation. But it's almost like he's fulfilled the prophecy, I guess, in a way that he was meant to become this. And I don't get to see him ride a lot, but when I do, I notice that he can put the bike wherever he wants to, and he rides the track a little differently, in my opinion. He could sort of jump the bumps, the bumps that guys are slamming into. He has a way of sort of floating on top of them, doubling, chop, whatever it is. It's special for sure.
Yeah, I believe in my heart that every time you get to watch Joel Hittrick ride, you're getting to watch history be made. And I'm not trying to take anything away from any of those other guys,
Yeah,
because they're working hard to be what they're to be out there.
right.
But Joel's spending the time, and he's a student of the industry and a student of riding, and he's constantly learning. And he's raising the bar for all of the younger guys.
Yeah,
They're all going to have to go to school
right.
and learn what he's learning to be at that level.
Right. The level's so high that there's that bar you have to shoot for. So it's going to make them work harder. And those top guys like Bryce Ford and stuff, they are really hauling it, and you can tell they're putting everything into it. So kudos to them. Yeah, for sure.
I think that their bar, they're getting faster. And if you've watched over the last few years, like I have closely, they're getting closer.
Mm-hmm.
Time they seem to make a large stride towards him,
Right.
Joel makes another stride on them.
Yeah.
He does something else to extend his, to keep his lead going, to keep, growing and going faster.
Right.
I don't know how much faster these guys can get,
Right.
but
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty incredible.
He's got a lot of tricks in the bag. Thinking about this Legends race that we both attended, I look back that I was fortunate enough to attend the original Legends race at Pine Lake in 2000, just as a fan of the sport. So to be there, and then I went back in 2018. They had another sort of anniversary for Pine Lake. I think it was Pine Lake's 50th anniversary, in Ashtabula, and I was there as well. So, I'm very happy that I've been at all three. Now, I missed the Huevos years, but the sort of Legends races in the industry, I've gotten to see them all. And, something I think a couple years back after I attended the 2018 Pine Lake, I started thinking about, I think it's the creative side of me that goes with being a journalist or having a magazine. I started thinking, if I was to put on a Legends race, what would it look like? And I'm going to share that with you and get your reaction. So for me, when I look back, and I think of me being, in grade school or in junior high and really obsessing over ATV racing, it was the Mickey Thompson series, and that was just right before my time. So I never got to see one in person or never got to ride one. And to me, that is just the awesomeness. I guess it's like our version of Supercross. So to me, I dream of building like a purpose-built Mickey's replica track. And then the quads, modern quads, but maybe they're fashioned to look like a Mickey's bike. A lot of those bikes they look like 89 250Rs, white plastic, red frame, red seat, chrome wheels, polished aluminum wheels, radial tires, all that. I think that would be just so cool. I propose we have this at Binky's museum. He has a lot of land there. He could build a Mickey's pad, you'd say, and I think that would be really cool thing that a lot of those guys would want to do, to get out on a track like that. Maybe not as much pressure, because, a national track, that's some serious business. You get, but like a Mickey's track to me always looked, smooth, um, not rough, I guess you'd say. So that's sort of my
A Mickey's is an entirely different ball game when it comes to bike setup, when it comes to skill set. The braking skills that you have on a Mickey's course are totally different than on an outdoor motocross track. You're talking about not all the guys at the Nationals would be Mickey's guys.
Yeah, that's right.
But then a lot of the guys that were there would still be involved,
Yeah.
But you'd be bringing some of the West Coast guys back, like Mark Earhart.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Charlie Shepard has passed on, but he would have been a definitely guy to bring into the Legends race.
Yeah.
I would love to see something like that, but
it's
whether we are out riding with our friends and family or racing in extreme environments, we all need good tires. That's why I recommend GBC Power Sports Tires, a division of Greenball Corp. Their products, which include XC Master, Mini Master, and Groundbuster 3, are what leading professionals in the ATV-UTV industry are using. You can get your tires at greenballtires.com or find them on Instagram as GBC Tires for further inquiries.
It would be a tough one.
Yeah.
Because you need a clay surface.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be tacky. And they're rough in their own way.
Mm-hmm. Different.
You are going to run a different compound tire. You're not going to run a TT bike. You're going to run a motocross bike, but with a TT style or a smooth tire. You're not going to run an obby.
Mm-hmm.
You run like a Hoosier.
Right.
So yeah, that would be something that'd be really awesome. You might even get some of the older guys to come out, like Mike Coe, maybe Jimmy White.
Yeah, Don Turk.
Yeah, Don Turk would be great to have. I don't think you'd get Marty Hart out there. I think his days of riding are pretty much over.
Yeah. But that's my dream, I guess, for like a Legends or one of these one-off type of events. For me,
let me ask you this.
Yeah.
When you were at the magazine,
yeah,
what was it like for you to go and write the articles at the races?
Well, I look at how journalism and media has changed, and I feel pretty fortunate that I did it in the era I did it in the fact that there wasn't that instantaneous need to upload while you're at the track, to post on social media, and you think too, ATV Insider magazine was bi-monthly. So you had time, you're at the track, you're taking notes, you're shooting photos, but there wasn't a lot of pressure to start creating content on the spot, like today's journalists have to do. So, from that regard, I think it was a little easier than it'd be to do it today, where it's instantaneous.
I'll tell you this, with what we do, generating content is what it's all about.
Mm-hmm.
And, we were having to generate content that Friday we were there, we were generating content that night.
Right.
And posting it. And then Saturday night we were posting more. And then we got off the plane, landed in San Diego, came home. I got to kiss my wife and we sat down and started building the videos and working on the content that we're putting out, which we're still, video 3 dropped last night.
Yeah.
For the series, and video 4 will drop this coming weekend. Or no. Yeah, I think this coming weekend.
Yeah.
So you're talking about, I mean, it's tough. We're constantly doing it. And you got to put a magazine out every month, but you still had to build all that content throughout the month.
Right. Well, it was actually pretty easy. And when I today was looking back, I think, the most challenging issue that we probably ever put out was the first issue. And the reason was, I mean, for one, I didn't really know anyone, didn't have connections. And, when I look at the issues, the content, it was a 48-page, book. So it had meat to it, but it was sort of fluff, in my opinion. It was more like season previews because the magazine came out the beginning of 2005. So it was a lot of sort of recapping 2004 and introducing 2005. But after that is the magazine started to mature, and really, you're between motocross, GNCC, and even dirt track series, there was always races to go to. So you're covering races, and then, as the magazine started to evolve, we got into a little bit more, I guess, personality type features. We'd go do a day in the life of Mark Baldwin, or we would go to Tom Carlson's house. And then when the factories were all putting out, or the OEMs are all putting out, bikes, then you start doing press introductions and bike tests. And so it sort of naturally evolved, and there was always things to do. So I never found it a challenge to, what are we going to put in the magazine? It was almost like the challenge was, what do we have to leave out of the magazine? Really. And two, I look back at the covers and deciding, who was going to get the cover was a challenge as well, because, our sport, similar to, other motorsports, it seems like when a guy's on top, he's on top. So, you have Bill Balance, he won 9 championships in a row. You get these guys, Natalie, wins them, Joe Bird 2 in a row, and you can't just put them on the cover every issue. So you look for legitimate reasons to put other people on the cover. So that was always fun and a challenge, but, never really got any flack from anybody over our choices.
Well, yeah, because everybody is excited about the magazine. I mean, I think one of the worst things there is, I mean, Dirt Wheels still has a paperback magazine. You can still touch it and smell it and open it and read it. And I'm old school. I like that.
Yeah.
I really do. It breaks my heart that the other guys aren't there anymore.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that was one thing too from the Legends race that I sort of picked up on. There again, I'm like, I don't know the people in the current ATV media, but I'm sure the numbers of personnel is not as great, when I was involved, because you had so many more magazines and websites and photographers. It was a real, healthy stable of people covering the sport, compared to now, I'm sure.
There was us, we were there, Digging Deep was there, Rip It Up Films was there. There was another drone company. I apologize to anybody that's listening that I'm not knowing the names of everybody. I don't follow all of the other media outlets because I'm so busy doing it myself that I don't have time. Not that they don't have great content. I barely have enough time to create my own, let alone
Right.
else's.
But I did run into Kenny Hill, Pappy, and it was nice to catch up with him. Now he was pretty integral part of ATV Insider, maybe not in the real infancy stages, but I would say midway through to the end, he was one of my primary photographers. And, we reminisced about, he would come to my house and we would do a lot of bike tests and stuff here. And he lived just a few hours away in West Virginia. And we were reminiscing about, he would come. And one time we had a KTM I think it was the 525, and it was in the snow and ice, and I was doing a creek crossing and busting through the ice, and he was standing in the creek in the middle of winter, just to get these photos, and we were just talking about good old times like that. But it sure was a lot of fun just to be involved in that area, and it just seemed like uh, you had the creative ability to do just about anything you wanted. You had support from the manufacturers with supplying you bikes. You had riders that wanted to be featured in the magazine. So I think collectively, usually if you had an idea, you can pull it off somehow.
Right. And we missed that because
Yeah.
I don't think that the younger people in the in the ATV industry or in the sports, because they can do so much of their own media, they're not as inclined to jump on some of these shows
Right.
and talk. Uh,
Yeah.
and I think that they don't understand that media of all forms, even your own, or like jumping on here with ATV-TALK or some of the Rip It Up films or whatever it is, you want to exposure. Your sponsors need exposure.
Yeah.
This is how you get it.
Right.
Even your own social media is great, but when another company wants you on their show, you
Right.
need to jump on it.
Right. Yeah, and that reminds me when I was going through the pages, and I hope to show a picture of this later in our interview, but the advertisements themselves were big. They meant something. The riders wanted to be featured in an ad. And so even just the photographers there, they're covering the race, but they want to get shots that a company will buy to put in an ad. So the advertising was just as exciting and as important as being in the magazine. So we've lost that.
I mean, I remember loving the fact when I would get to speak to somebody in that was writing the magazine articles, or the fact that the first time I got to ride the machine in the article. My brother always had somebody to ride the machine that was a professional. So I wasn't obviously a professional.
Yeah.
I wasn't the greatest rider, but when I finally got the chance to do a few articles and to ride them, dude, I've saved all that stuff and I have it, and it means the world to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you're in print.
Right. And, I was reminded of that. It's a Legends race, just, going up to, Chris Bithell and, reconnecting with him, and right away, his mom and his friends around, hey, we have that ATV Insider hanging in our shop, in a plastic cover, and Adam McGill and his buddies, talking about, the magazine and looking back at it and how they have them framed, and the frosted tips and the shell necklace, and just, a moment in time, but you realize how much it meant to everybody, and they're still holding on to that.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest thing for me, is understanding, no, we're not paperback, we're video. And the video is going to last as long as the magazine.
Right.
Other than you can't hang it on your wall.
Right. Yeah.
And you can download it and keep it in your phone, or have a recording of it, but I hope that in years to come, they'll think back on it and they'll be able to go back and look at their interview and their time with ATV-TALK and go, hey, grandkids, this was me 30 years ago, or when I was racing.
Right.
And
I look at ATV Insider in that way, in terms of, now that we're so far removed from that time, because it wasn't digital, I find that wouldn't it be nice if that content was evergreen for the people now, future generations? Because there's a lot of history there that, people that are into the history and being a student of the sport, that's valuable information. And it's like, if you weren't there at the time and didn't get it then, you don't have it. So it's sort of a catch 22.
And when did you come into the industry?
So we can back up and, get in the time machine and go back a little bit and kind of start from the beginning. But the short answer to your question is, the magazine launched at the motocross season opener at Glen Helen in February of 2005.
Okay.
So sort of, I don't know how far you want to go back. I'll try to be
Well,
quick.
I'm talking about you personally with the ATV industry. How far back do you go?
So I guess my first interaction with an ATV would have been, I want to say, in 1987. So prior to that, let's just say around the age of, I think I, first started riding a mini bike. I was probably nine or 10 years old. I got a Suzuki DS80, rode it around for about a year, and then got a 79 YZ80. And like I said, I was probably 11, 12 years old at that time. So I was, riding dirt bikes, just recreational around our neighborhood in the fields and things. But I don't know how. I think, my mom worked at a bank, and one of her coworkers' husbands was into motocross. So she would bring home these motocross magazines.
Are you looking for the best suspension technology for your sport ATV? Look no further than Elka Suspension, the industry leader in sport ATV suspension technology. With championship wins in prestigious events such as the Dakar Rally, Score, Best in the Desert, ATV MX, Cross Country, and Works, Elka Suspension has established itself as the go-to choice for athletes and enthusiasts alike. But they don't just stop at ATVs. They're constantly expanding into new markets, including UTVs, trucks, SUVs, pit bikes, snowmobiles, and more. Their commitment to innovation and quality means they're always looking to improve and adapt so you can enjoy a smooth ride wherever you go. Want to learn more about what Elka Suspension can do for you? Visit their website at elkasuspension.com or give them a call at 450-655-4855. They will always be happy to answer your questions and help you find the perfect suspension solution for your needs.
So at that age, I was, obsessed with Rick Johnson and Jeff Ward and Jim Hawley and all these guys in Dirt Bike Magazine. And so, I think that's started my affinity for magazines. But what started my connection to ATVs came one day riding, we call it the strips, and it's basically coal mine strip coal mine fields and woods. And I was riding with a group of friends from school, not friends from my neighborhood, but friends from school that had 3-wheelers and 4-wheelers. And I was the only one on a dirt bike. So we're going in and out of the creek trails. When you go across the creek, the rocks are really mossy and slippery. The banks coming out of the creeks are all slimy. And I was still a young rider at that point, and I was having a terrible time. I broke my rear fender, broke my front fender that day. I was really having a rough time. And one of my friends, I think he could tell, and he was like, "Hey, can I ride your dirt bike? And you could ride my 4-wheeler." And that's the first time I rode a 4-wheeler. And he had an 86 Suzuki Quad Sport 230. And when I got on that thing, it was like a lifesaver. It wasn't just fun. It took me from a really bad time in my life to an amazing time in my life, all in a matter of minutes. because I'm on this quad. I'm blasting through the creek trails. I don't have to think about falling on the rocks, falling, getting stuck coming out of the creek. And I discovered something also, that when you're getting in a turn, you just sort of pitch it out sideways a little bit, and you just keep going, blowing through the turn. So it was like one of these moments that I fell in love with ATVs. And so from that point on, I begged my parents to buy me a four-wheeler. And so within a short amount of time, my dad bought me and my brother brand new 87 Quad Sport 230s. And I would say I'd be about 12 years old.
Nice.
Yep. And so that's what really, from that point, it was, I was an ATV guy. And then I sort of transitioned from there. My dad sold that four-wheeler because he was tired of fixing it. I got to the point where I was riding it so hard and he wasn't a mechanic or even into riding. So he's like, I'm done with this. But eventually I got a 88 250R, and I got hooked up with some older guys that were racing District 5, which, was home to High Point and Steel City. And they would take me to the races. I was probably about 15, and we did District 5 motocross, and I did that for a little while, a couple years. And there again, that was just being a fan, racing locally. And then, graduated high school in 93, so I sold my four-wheeler, got out of racing because it was time to go to college, time to grow up, the whole deal. And, after I went through college, started my career, started making some money, I bought a brand new CR dirt bike and a brand new 400EX. That would have been a 99 400EX. And that kind of rekindled, my interest in riding and racing. And probably within, I would say, a year, I think it was maybe, so I bought that bike probably 99 or 2000. And then I think the first year they had the Powerline Park GNCC in Ohio, that was, I think, 2001. That was my first GNCC. And so I got the bug again, racing. So that was, I think, the second to last round of the year. So then I said, all right, I'm gonna race GNCCs next year. So I sort of built the bike over the winter and did the whole thing. And sort of around that time period, I think it was 2003, I had the opportunity, along with my brother-in-law, to buy a Yamaha dealership. So 2003, I'm fully entrenched in racing GNCCs on a quad. I have a dirt bike that I'll do some local motocross on, and I own a Yamaha dealership. So I'm fully engaged in power sports industry and all that thing. And because I'm
a job or just the dealership?
I actually owned a chain of community newspapers.
Okay.
And that sort of goes back to where I always wanted to own a magazine. And when my wife and I, got out of college and were getting started in life, she was a journalist by trade. And I was actually a marketing graduate. I wanted to own a magazine. She was a journalist. And there was a local newspaper on her beat that was for sale. The owner had passed away, things like that. And a little further in our background, both of us come from family-owned business type families, so we always want to own our own business. And so, hey, this newspaper's for sale. I said, it's not a magazine, but it's the next best thing. So I'm on board. Let's buy a newspaper. I could sell the ads and do all the business, and you could write all the stories and be the journalist. And so that was in 1999. So we'd been, fast forward to 2003, when me and my brother-in-law buy this Yamaha dealership, I own a publishing business at that point. We combine that with the dealership. So yeah, I'm pretty busy guy, I guess you'd say, running two businesses. But as an enthusiast and a racing enthusiast, I would anxiously await dirt wheels coming in the mail every month. And I was so disappointed every month. I would wait and I would get this magazine and I would blow through it in 5 minutes and think, geez, out of this whole magazine, there's 10 pages that I actually care about. And I think that went on for a while. And that's what started to sort of ignite that flame or that idea in me that it'd be cool to start my own magazine, because then I can fill it with everything I want to see. As a consumer, the things I'm craving, I'll just put them in that magazine. So that's really, I think, sort of, having that background in publishing, owning a dealership, racing GNCCs, that's where the idea of I should just start my own magazine. And then I kind of figured if I felt that way, there's probably a lot of other people out there that feel the same. But the real launching point for ATV Insider to go from an idea, and I guess you'd say a pipe dream, to reality, I actually credit to Tim Farr. And the story behind that is in 2003, and I don't remember the time of year, if it was summer or fall. It couldn't have been much later than fall. It could have been spring, I'm not sure. But I think it was mid to late 2003. As the dealership, we were invited to like a track day in Ohio. And I don't know if it was through Parts Unlimited or something, but it's a private ride day at a track called Scenic Highlands in Ohio that no longer exists. So we were up there riding, getting started, and this box van comes rolling in. Kames Sports. I don't know if you remember Kames. Yeah. It was it was in Canton, Ohio, but they were really prominent in our area and sponsoring Tim, and later on Josh Upperman, Mark Kendall. But anyway, this box van comes in. I don't really know anything, but anyway, Tim Farr, and he unloads a TRX number 4 on it, and he's out there, starts burning some laps. So anyway, I was watching him, and I have this idea about the magazine, and I just decided I'm going to go over there and talk to him, and I'm going to tell him about my idea. And that seems kind of crazy. I've never met him. So I go over there and introduce myself and kind of tell him about my idea to start a magazine. And he was real supportive, and I think that really was the deciding factor. If he would have said, buzz off, or hey, I'm busy testing, or whatever, I don't think ATV Insider would have happened. But the fact that he took the time, was pleasant, was interested, and he even went and got his wife, Julie, was there, and she had been shooting photos, and introduced me to Julie. And then one thing led to another. It's sort of like Tim Farr thought it was a good idea in my head. This is my reasoning. Julie Farr is shooting photos, so she can give me the photos. And then she started telling me about all these other people that are taking photos who I didn't know, like Harlan Foley, so on and so forth, John Pellin. And it really started from there. That gave me the confidence that I think we can actually do this. So that's really sort of how it, went from a dream to reality. And from that, I don't really remember it, but, I started gathering photos and story ideas. And I think, the cover of that first issue featured Jeremiah Jones on a LT 400, and he was coming off, winning the championship on a Yamaha, and signed a 2-year deal with Suzuki. And that was sort of, the launch of factory racing again. So that was that was a big story. That was our sort of cover story. I remember getting a hold, I think through Harlan Foley, Roy Bloodworth, who's a West Coast guy you may be familiar with.
Yep.
He got the photos of Jeremiah on a Suzuki, and I guess you say the rest is history, but that's really what began it. As crazy as it is.
And you ran that for how many years?
So 6 years, essentially. I ran it through to 2010. So 2005 to 2010.
What was the reason for not continuing?
So the reason was, there again, you have to keep in mind, I owned a dealership.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a little bit of head start on seeing which way the industry was heading. So we had a small single line dealership, Yamaha only. And we were selling 35 bikes a month consistently. And when the credit crisis happened, I guess you'd say that was 2008-ish, somewhere in there.
It started in 8 and
Yep.
Really was in full swing in 10.
Yeah. So our dealership went from selling 35 units a month to less than 10 a month. We would sell anywhere from 7 to 10.
Are you ready to be captivated by one of nature's masterpieces? Discover the breathtaking beauty of Antelope Slot Canyon, a natural wonder in Page, Arizona. Join us on a guided tour and immerse yourself in the mystical light beams, rich colors, and serene landscapes. With tours at prime sunbeam hours, experience photographer's paradise and capture memories that will last a lifetime. Comfortable shoes, a camera, and a smile are all you need for this adventure. Book your journey today at Antelope Slot Canyon Tours and let the canyon enchant you. Please visit us now, antelopeslotcanyon.com, for more details.
In an instant, just like that. And so on one hand, I had this business that was going through this extreme transition, extreme decline, whatever you want to call it. And even the economy as a whole at that time was, in upheaval because of that. So there again, my other bread and butter was the newspaper industry, and which was reliant on small businesses to advertise. And, all this sort of economic turmoil, made me sort of realize that the writing was on the wall, that this industry is going to retract and all this factory stuff's going to go away. And I think it's going to be a long haul till it returns. And I just kind of felt like that was the time. Like I wasn't really prepared to wait it out. So that's really why that transition happened. And Harlan actually ended up taking over the magazine. I don't know if it was the end of 10, middle of 10, sometime around there. So that's my time.
So it continued on for a while.
For a while, and I think it's still published today. He changed the name, and I think it's still maybe some kind of, he really heavily transitioned into side-by-side racing, West Coast racing, and I think it exists, or at least it did in recent years, but it was a totally different name and really different direction.
So how much do you miss being involved in the ATV sport itself?
Well, I mean, when you go to the races, like the Legends race, it makes you miss it a lot. But also, I have a very busy life, with married with 4 children, multiple businesses, you know, life comes at you fast, and it's almost like you're always just trying to keep your head above water anyway. So there's not a lot of time to reflect on that really. So, but I'm definitely fond of the times and the people, and that's what I miss most are the people. I do talk to Mark Baldwin occasionally, Tom Carlson, Shane Hitt, even Chad Ween, and even more less frequently. But those interactions, I cherish, and it is, and it too. It's just like no time passed, and that's what's so great. You could not talk to someone for a couple of years, or not see them for 10 years, like recently, and it's almost like you jump right back in. It's just that everyone has that sort of common interest and common feeling about ATV racing, that we all love the same thing. So but that's what I miss most, the people and those relationships.
Yeah, I've said this so many times on the show. I think people are tired of hearing it. If you want to meet the greatest people in the world, go to an ATV race.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. So
Most all the people that I have near and dear in my life, I've met through ATV racing. Not my wife, but my wife's been to less than a handful of races in our time together, and she's just not really into it. But
right.
She loves the fact that I'm passionate about it, and lets me take care of it. And you met Valeria, my youngest.
Yeah, yeah.
And she's never really ridden an ATV.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have. I want to get one. I don't even own one that I could teach her on. I want to get, like a 250X or a 250SX and teach her on one of those. I just haven't got my hands on one yet. And the first time I took her to the sand dunes, I did the unthinkable. We had a UTV, and I rolled it.
Yeah, right. I've done that.
So she's not afraid of it, because
Yeah.
she's riding with other friends of mine.
Right.
She just doesn't want to ride with Dad anymore. So
right. I will tell you that, one thing that sort of being in the ATV media at that time period, when it ended, what ruined me was I had a hard time buying an ATV for the longest time, because you get used to getting, test bikes, parts and accessories given to you, and you get used to that. And for the longest time, I couldn't come to terms with actually buying an ATV. But more and also, I owned a Yamaha dealership for a number of years too. So, we would buy things at dealer cost, or take them off the showroom for a little while and test them, and then sell them as used. So, definitely that was a perk that I had for a long time, that was hard to readjust to reality, when it comes to that.
I bet.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could go from what I do now to that. And with ATV-TALK, we don't get test models, but with my regular job, I'm working on machines constantly. So
right.
It's always happening.
Right. Yeah.
You said you had some magazine covers that you wanted to show.
Yeah. Let's see if we could go through some photos, just to see what, give people a little bit of an idea of what we're looking at.
It's history is how much West Coast time did you spend, doing stories on the West Coast?
Yeah, I mean, not as much as I would have liked to. And when I look back at it, one of my fondest memories associated with that is going to Glen Helen. As someone from Ohio, Glen Helen is really historical and just a really cool place. And I listen to things today, on the dirt bike side, and people complain about Glen Helen, but It was really cool. I got to go there twice at least and ride. They had the press introduction there in 2006 for the LTR. So we got to ride Glen Helen. That was really cool. But yeah, I would say going out there. But I'm trying to think much beyond that. Never any works races in person, anything like that. Now I had a works rider come to my house, Tim Shellman, when he came to the East Coast to give his try at GNCC's. They brought his bike here to sort of shake down, and that was cool to have Tim and Maria's wife here, along with Santo Derisi, I think, was coordinating that deal and supplied him the bike. And certainly I got to talk to like Josh Frederick, people like that, but no, didn't get out west that much. And a lot of the big series, didn't go that far.
Right. They had brief moments where they came out west, but in the big series on the West Coast was, you have Score, Best in the Desert, and Works.
Mm-hmm.
Those were the series on the West Coast that
Yep.
you could cover at that time, and they were still, really big at that point.
Right. Hey, Lenny, just to let you know, so we'll have to do this the old-fashioned way. So I did get some photos together that I wanted to share, but it's not allowing me to share my screen. It says only the host can share their screen. So I have some hard copies that I can hold up, but I will send you the pictures, and you can create a little slideshow for people later on. So I have some good things in there to show.
On the YouTube show, we'll definitely do that.
Okay.
On the audio portion, photos don't really do justice for everybody.
Right. But here, to give you an idea, here's, I don't know if it's, I have it blurred.
If you hold it directly in front, I can see it.
Oh. Here, let me see if I could switch this real quick. I'll do no background. And so here's the premiere issue.
That's awesome.
So you could see,
awesome.
This magazine was a newspaper. It was printed on newsprint, and there again, my background in the newspaper industry made for a logical first step. So it was 48 pages, and one thing that I say we. Really important person in all this was my graphic designer, Mark Barilla. He really made everything look good. And one thing that we experienced early on is newsprint doesn't reproduce the greatest quality. So we found ourselves very early on, getting these amazing photos, and on the screen they just look fantastic, and then in print it loses its dynamics, its luster, its detail. So we always look towards when will be a glossy magazine. So ATV Insider, and this was the second issue, but basically the magazine had a few different transitions. So for the first 2 years, it was a newspaper like that, sort of cut to be like a tabloid size. And then it transitioned. This was year 3. So you can see it has a glossy cover.
Yep. So the photos would pop way better.
Yeah. But the inside pages were still, they were still newsprint, but it was on a different printing process. So that it was a little better, and all the pages were trimmed. So it was a nicer reproduction. And so the photos did get better. And here's, this is year 4, same format. But then in year 5, we we did go to a traditional full glossy, and the trims. I mean, the magazine was a slightly smaller, but still considered oversized.
I like it.
Mm-hmm. And then this would have been this was year 6, so this was my last year. This would have been 2010, and you can probably notice up here Cody Evans, the next big thing in quad cross. So that's your neck of the woods.
Yep. That's crazy.
Yeah. So that's sort of I guess you'd say, the maturation of the magazine from 2005 to 2010, going, it seemed like every 2 years sort of upgrading.
Let me ask you a question. I understand that. Do you ever think back on if you could have went, 11, 12, maybe 13 or 14, a little farther to into the magazine thing?
I never did. No.
Never thought about going back?
No. Now, I would say I mean, you look back and say, yeah, it'd be nice, I mean, to go back in time, but the industry is not the same. And but I have considered and wanted to get involved in ATV and media, but maybe in a different format. Obviously podcasts, you do a great job, and Jansen does a great job. So I thought about doing those things before you guys launched yours, and at this point I don't see there's really it's necessary to have more. But I do I enjoy the creative aspect of all this, and so I do find myself I would say for the past several years thinking about different things to do, but it's always I'm just involved in so many other things, it's just hard to get to it all. And I know too that it's the return on your time monetarily, it's a hobby when it comes down to.
Yes, this is a labor of love. This isn't something that I do because I'm making money at it.
Right. And I understand that. And so that's why it's always been hard to sort of stop what you're doing and carve out something. But I would just say that it's still a hope of mine that the work that not just I did, but this ATV Insider is such a collection of talented people. I just sort of spearheaded it and got it going. But from the photographers to the contributors to the designers, Mark Barilla.
Are you allowed to publish the magazines? Okay, when you sold it, do you still own the old versions of it, or does somebody else own it?
That was such a long time ago. I have not even looked into that, but I will say that it is my hope that somehow this information will be accessible in one form or another. And so that's something I do think about, and I do hope to do. It's just a matter of time, I think, at this point, but hopefully sooner than later.
Right. I get it.
Yep.
That's so cool. I mean, it is pretty awesome stuff, getting to talk to you about an era of life when, we were racing on the West Coast mostly because racing on the East Coast had gotten so expensive, it wasn't feasible. We were still sponsoring people that raced over there, but we weren't driving or spending time going to the East Coast.
Right. Yeah. Right. I guess it'd be the same case then for us. There was at times where, it was a little bit of, budget wise, you had to say, hey, does it really make sense for all that travel and things when I can drive to this race or that race type of thing?
I'm in the same boat with the
Mhm.
podcast. You know, we want to travel, we want to go do these events. It's just, even for the local events on the West Coast, it's so expensive.
Mhm.
I mean, gas out here is unreal.
Right. Yeah.
That's excellent. I also don't know if you noticed, nothing I do is scripted.
Mhm.
I don't believe that we should script it. I like it raw because I want people to know exactly what you're thinking at the time when we talk about it, because
Right.
that's what's so important.
Yeah. I mean, I was, there again, like I mentioned earlier, we're talking 15 to 20 years ago. Uh, and it's hard to remember everything. And so I tried to go back and look at some of the magazines before coming on with you. And it's almost it's hard to do it justice, I think, in the time frame that we have. I look at all the stories and just to give you an idea of some of the cool things. I mean, obviously, all the press introductions. That was an amazing thing. I think when Suzuki launched the LTR, I mean, they flew us to Disney, put us up to Disney. How wild is that? They pick you up at Disney in the morning, they take you to Glen Helen, you get to ride. But there again, it was kind of neat because I think that when manufacturers are doing that, they try to one up each other or one up themselves. When Suzuki launched the 2008 version of the LTR, they did that at Doug Gust's house.
Right.
So we all went to Doug's house and rode on his track, and I think it was Traxxas was one of their sponsors, and he had an RC track, and we raced RC trucks, and they gave us brand new RC trucks, but they shipped them to you, so you didn't have to travel back with them. But just to sort of, I mean, that was an amazing trip because Doug's house was like a playground for one. He had a little pond there that you can jump your BMX bike into. He would do jet skiing on there for training. He had the track, he had the RC track. Some of the bigwigs from Suzuki were there, like Mel Harris. You'd go in the trailer and Mel's in there, calling dealers, taking orders. The Japanese engineers were there, and I still, when I see Doug, I always tell him that when I was at your house, one thing that stands out to me is he had his hangars for his airplanes. He just had brand new concrete, big, huge slabs of concrete for his airplanes and his driveway and stuff. And he was adamant about he didn't care what you do, but don't drive your ATV on the concrete. And one of the Japanese engineers rode on the concrete, and Doug, gave him an earful over that. I thought that was really just the funniest thing. So a lot of cool things when it comes to that. Another sort of memorable bike intro was when they launched the Kawasaki KFX. They did it there at a riding park in South Carolina, but it was just so cool to, Jimmy White was there. And of course, William Yoakley was one of, their main riders. And just, at the hotel that night, after a long day of riding and all that, just those guys kicking back and they, get a little loose and they start telling stories, and to be able to just be a fly on the wall. Those are the things that just like, wow, I can't believe it. And just, some of the special times. It goes sort of beyond just going to the race and standing in a corner and taking a picture as they go by.
It's the personal relationship you get to have with these people that, your readers are reading about, and they don't get that personal touch that you do.
Right.
The difference between, I think, what we do now, the viewers and the listeners get to hear you talk personally, and they get to hear the story right from you
Yeah.
versus reading about it. And I think that's why one of the reasons why I like podcasts so much is because the person that I'm interested in hearing from is right there.
Yeah.
You can either watch it or just listen to it, and you get the full story.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, there again, I mentioned that, I think the magazine was, I like to think it was successful. And I measure that success not so much monetarily, but more so that people seem to like it. And that's a real, that's attributed to the contributors. There again, our designer, Mark Barilla, that came up with uh, the look of the magazine, and the contributors, not just photographers like Harlan and Kenny Hill, Roy, all these guys. And I mean, Ray Gundy, the list is endless of all the people, and even the people that wrote the stories. I ran into at the Legends race, uh, Joe Bird's longtime friend, Jimmy Wiles. I don't know if you know him, but he's been in ATVs, for a long time. And he even was telling, I gave him an opportunity to write some kind of article, and he still talks about that, and it's just really cool. And, Adam McGill, he's entertaining, he's his own thing. But the fact that, I got to work with him before he was Gator, I guess you'd say, when he was still Kurt instead of Adam. He was a pro-am, and he came to my house. His grandfather drove him up here from West Virginia, and we went and did a photo shoot with him. And we could tell right away that, that he was special. I mean, not just as a rider, but just as a personality. So just even getting his articles every issue that he would send to me, just what is Adam going to say next? All those things are really good memories. And going down to his house. And one of the things I'll share with you is, we did a story with him. And when sort of you have participants that are willing to sort of put themselves out there like he was and other people, you get good results. We did one of the things we did with him, because he's so high spirited. We did an article on him called The Good Humor Man. And I dressed him up in a like a good humor outfit that I went and rented from a costume store. And we went in his town into the local Breyers ice cream store and said, hey, will you let us dress Adam up and come behind the counter and serve some ice cream? And he put some ice cream on his nose. And and it's just the magazine, for me, that's when it was at its best, when it sort of started more as race coverage. And then for me personally, when it evolved into doing things like that, I wasn't so much a technical person when it comes to the bike shootouts or the bike test, but that was fun to do. But getting to do a day in the life of Mark Baldwin, or going to TC's house, going down to Adam McGill's house and dressing him up in a costume, basically, all those things. I went to, I did the Joe Bird riding school, as a magazine editor. And, so to experience all that firsthand, it was racing, but it was outside of the races. To me, that was the best times for the magazine and for me personally.
I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, the experiences that you got,
Yeah.
and I'd like to read that story on Joe Bird's riding school. That would be awesome.
Yeah. So there's a couple things.
If you still have that, I'd love to read it and publish it on my site if you would, if you'd let me.
Yeah, I'm sure I have, pretty much most, or if not all, of the PDFs of the pages. But two things that really stand out to me, and when I saw Joe, I did ask him about that. There's two things that stand out. One, so I had a YFZ 450 when I went down there, and it was not extremely built, but I think I had Elka shocks and a Hauser front end and a Hauser rear end and Elka rear shock. But anyway, I blitzed the whoops and I stayed on top of them. And I don't know that I really intended to, but I had the confidence on that bike, and based on the whoops, that I didn't need to jump through them. I could get the speed and just go on top of them. I knew I could do it. And I did that, and they pulled me off the track. Joe, his mechanics, and they put the bike up on a stand and they were checking it out. They were like, how'd this guy do this? So I always thought that stood out to me, because I was really just probably like a B-class rider. And I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. They wanted to see what my bike setup was. Not that I had a setup. They wanted to see what I was doing to go through these whoops. That always stood out to me as pretty cool. And so I always, when I see Joe, I ask him about that. And he says, oh, yeah, I remember doing that. And the other thing, too, I remember that was kind of funny is he had all the students sitting in a circle in his shop or something. He'd go around and he pushed on our heads down, and it hurt so bad. But he was, stretching. It was part of the sort of stretching and fitness aspect. But that was like really funny to me, that I felt like he was trying to kill me by snapping my head off. But those are the things that you don't get at the track, and Joe Bird, probably, if I hadn't gone to his house, obviously I would have covered him because he won championships and was winning races. But I don't know that, there's some riders that are a little easier to approach than others. And I could see, if I didn't know Joe, if I didn't go through that experience, I probably would have had a harder time covering him in terms of approaching him for interviews, calling him during the week for an interview. So those things, I think, sort of broke the ice too, between media and rider.
I agree. Yep. I'm blessed being who I am and knowing all the people that I know,
right?
Being able to talk to, it doesn't help me with some of the younger riders, but then again, it does, because some of the younger riders look up to the older riders that I do know.
Yeah.
And it opens the door for me. But David, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time. I want to extend the invitation to have you again, if you would like. We've already, my daughter puts a time limit on all the shows. Yep. We've already reached and went past that time limit.
Sure.
But that's okay.
Yep.
I would like to invite you to come back.
Thank you.
And I already wanted to put it out there. I want to set it up so that maybe we can do something a little different, and maybe bring you on one of my live shows and do something like that. What do you think?
I'm in. Yeah, pencil me in. I'm all for it, and I certainly appreciate the opportunity, and it's a pleasure to get to talk to you and be a part of this. And Duncan Racing, there again, you know that the name's historic for a guy that was looking at Dirt Wheels magazines in junior high. Duncan Racing is iconic name. So the fact that you want me to be on the other end of the call is really fantastic. So I'm all in.
Brother, it's the same, because you just happen to be on the other side of the article now, where before, in years past, I was in your seat. So that's right. It's all the same, and we got to work together. But what I'm proposing is putting you back in your editor's position, kind of, when I bring you on one of the shows, and we'll talk about specific situations or things coming up in the industry. Get some of those old magazine guy juices back to where you've given your opinions on certain things that happen in the industry. So be prepared for that. We always have good shows on our live. We have a live talk show that we do on Sunday.
Yeah.
And I just was thinking that you'd be great to have on that.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, don't forget to share us with your family and friends. The podcast is available on all streaming platforms, and you can find us on social media as ATV-TALK Podcast. We're on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Rumble, and Twitter.